All right. Again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jesse Ost, and I work in the sales and marketing. I head up the sales and marketing division for EXP Technical, and want to thank you guys for joining us today. It's a bright, sunny afternoon, and hopefully we'll make it worth it with our giveaway at the end, and also the good information that we have coming from our CEO, Tony Lesirge. Today we're going to be talking about EXP Technical and specifically how we approach and plan and map out our cybersecurity program for our clients and what that would look like going into an initial meeting as well. So you can see our 10 key areas that we focus on within that cybersecurity program. So we'll go ahead and move into it, reducing risk without breaking the bank. And real quick, just a couple housekeeping items, questions. There is a question box. You guys can submit your questions within the webinar, and we'll get to those at the end. But from now until we go, we'll just hold on to those. Raise a hand, put it into chat, and we'll get to it after we wrap up. So yeah, let's introduce Tony, our CEO. Tony's got 20 years of experience in IT across multiple segments and industries. Both here in Seattle and on the western coast. You can see some of his key points. Not only a really good-looking guy, but he's got an amazing accent. So when you get to sit down with him too, it'll make you feel super at ease. And again, 20 years experience. I've been working with Tony for about 10 years, and I tell you what, he doesn't miss much. So format for today, kind of went over it. We'll hop right in here, and I'll let Tony kick it off with our presentation. Then again, we'll have the Q&A, and then we'll send out a recording of this after we get done. And then at the end, we'll do the prize drawing, and you have to be online to be eligible to win that. So once everything's said and done and we do that, we'll get in touch with you and we'll get that over to you. So Tony, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Jesse. Hello, everyone. This is Tony. And I'm going to get things started with a true story from the field. This actually happened to one of our clients before we dive into the rest of the presentation. So last year, someone in the accounting department at one of our clients got a spear phishing email. And this email had a malicious PDF attached to it. Now they opened that up, and they went ahead and clicked on the link in there, which took them to a fraudulent Office 365 login page. They entered their credentials, and when they did that, they were actually giving their credentials to the attacker, the person who sent them the spear phishing email. Now that person went ahead and logged into their email, and the first thing they did was to set up a rule that forwarded this person's email to their own Gmail account, to the attacker's Gmail account. Now, interestingly, the next thing they did was just sit there and they just waited and watched. And they looked at all the emails going by. And then a few weeks later, they saw going outbound from this person's mailbox a large invoice. And at this point, they inserted themselves into the conversation. They still had direct access through Outlook web access to this person's email. And they sent an email to the customer of our client and said, please could you pay this invoice to our new bank account? And here are the details of that. Now, fortunately, between the customer, our client, and EXP Technical, we were able to stop this before the transaction happened. And the cash was never sent, and luckily the attacker didn't get it. But my point here is that people are out there and they do some really crazy things in order to get what seems like a relatively small amount of money. So I'm sure all of you out there have seen the iTunes phishing emails, the spear phishing emails that look like they come from the CEO or their business owner or someone senior in the organization. And people are out there trying to get relatively small amounts of money targeting small businesses. So my point is, it's really not just big businesses that need to be thinking about cybersecurity anymore these days. So the goal of today is to do a little education, like the information I just shared, like the story I just shared about the cybersecurity landscape. We'll talk about how we at EXP assess and try to mitigate the risk for our clients. We'll share 10 key things, measures, or controls, as they're often referred to in the cybersecurity industry, the things that we recommend you do, and we'll talk about how much that might cost you. So just to give some context here about the cybersecurity landscape today, the US is the largest target out there, the #1 target for cyber attacks. And the US government plans to spend about $15 billion this year alone on cybersecurity. SCORE, who are an organization that works hand in hand with the US Small Business Association, and they do mentoring, coaching, training. They did a report that stated that 43% of attacks are now targeted at small businesses. And Juniper, who are a network security company, in one of their reports, reported that small businesses are investing less than $500 per year in cybersecurity products and defense. And finally, Aviva, they're an insurance company, a worldwide insurance company, and they put out a statistic that if you are breached, 60% of your customers or clients will think about moving on because of the impact that, I guess, that they're scared that their data or their information was also breached that you're holding, and 30% of them do move on. So this is, as we have seen at EXP, a real issue. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a growing number of attacks with phishing, with ransomware, etc. So we've put together, and we've been obviously doing things with our clients to mitigate these risks, but we decided it was time to put together a formal program to try and help our clients. Now, our approach, as with everything we do, is to try and right size, if you like, our program. So enterprises out there with large IT departments, they're going to have whole teams of people who can work on this stuff. They're going to have huge budgets in terms of putting in solutions and services. We know that's not the case for our clients. So we try and build these things so that they are simple enough, affordable enough, and obviously effective in tackling some of the problems that small businesses can face. So our approach was, #1, figure out what we think the key things you can do are. #2, develop a way to assess the status of each of our clients. And then #3, propose affordable, simple solutions that can mitigate the risks. And as with all these things, this isn't a one-time process. We are looking to then reassess. So we'll be looking in the future at, okay, these were the 10 we decided were the right things to look at in 2019. Maybe in 2020, there's some new things that come up. So it's cyclical, and the idea is that we do this on an ongoing basis. So I'm not going to read this entire slide out. I'm not expecting you to read all of it. The point I'm trying to make with this is that the cybersecurity, IT security, requires a multi-layered approach. Many, many things can and should be done to help protect you. This is just a small sample of all the things that could be done. There are many, many more. What we've done is choose 10 that we believe will provide the biggest bang for the buck and have the biggest impact for our clients who are typically, under 100 people, definitely under 500 people. So these are the things that we've picked, and we've ordered them from the basic things that you might include in a cybersecurity program, all the way down to what might be included in a more mature program. And I'll be diving into each one of these in a lot more detail, so I'm not going to go through them one by one as we look at this slide. But you can see, up at the top, basic password policy. Moving on down, if I had to pick one thing that we would recommend everyone do, it's probably multi-factor authentication, which is a very strong protection against many of the attacks we're seeing today. Down to security and awareness training, which again, some people don't think about, but is critical for helping people spot these types of attacks, because the software can't always do everything. And at the bottom, a risk assessment, which again, we'll cover a little more shortly. Now you'll notice there's some things that you might think are obvious that aren't on here. Antivirus might be one of them. So we've made some assumptions that clients, small businesses out there are going to have in place some basic measures already. And we've tried to pick some things that we see aren't always in place or people aren't always thinking about. As I alluded to before in the previous slide, there's many, many things you can do. We've picked these 10. We think these are the right 10 to focus on now, but obviously we'll be constantly reviewing that. So how do we assess the current status of a client as we begin this type of exercise? Well, we took our 10 measures and we developed a simple way to score them, 0, 1, and 2. We weighted them all equally for the sake of keeping it simple. And then we calculate a total and convert it to a percentage. And then you can see in this demo here, if you like, that the clients below 25% are considered high risk. The medium clients in orange there, that's between 25 and 75% score, are in that medium risk, and the high risk, or the low risk, I'm sorry, are over 75%. So pretty straightforward and fairly simple to do based on the criteria that we're about to look at. So we're going to go through each one of the controls, the measures that we talked about, and I'll go through what we're looking at, what we think you should be doing. And once we finish that, as I said, we'll go into how we do this and what it might cost. So password policy might seem obvious. Not everyone has them, especially not with expiration. So we're looking for a policy to be in place. We're looking for complexity rules, and by that we mean requiring uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers, and at least expiration every 6 months. Taking it to the next level to get a score of 2 on our measure, we're looking for multi-factor authentication. That's for local login, not just Office 365, whether that be on your Windows domain or local Windows workstation, or the use of passphrases. And passphrases in current security thinking, IT security thinking, are what is really recommended. They're essentially very long passwords made up of multiple words with punctuation, spaces, etc. They're very hard to crack, but they're typically easy to remember. And they take a little training for people to get the hang of creating them. I have an example of one here. So 3 banana pancake sundae happy. You can see it's got uppercase, lowercase, number, special character. It's long, but actually pretty easy to remember, but extremely difficult to hack. So once you get people in the mindset and trained on how to create these things, they can be extremely effective. Combine that with multi-factor authentication and you have a very secure password. Okay, so the next one is backups. And you may not necessarily think of backup straight away when you think of security. But of course, if you do get compromised, if you are a victim of a ransomware attack, then you need to be able to recover, and backups are critical. So we're looking for local image-based backups. We're looking for secured backup targets. That's critical. We actually haven't seen this, but we have read that in some ransomware attacks, not only is the data encrypted, but the backups are also encrypted. So then you are left with no choice but to pay the ransom. So backup targets, that's where the backups are stored, should be secure. Only the backup software and a very few number of administrators should have access to it. And of course, we're looking for some kind of offsite backup. To take it to the next level, we're looking for a cloud-based disaster recovery service. That's some kind of cloud service that actually allows you to recover, run your servers or your systems in the cloud. Or alternatively, you know, if it's not a purpose-built service, maybe it's a co-location facility, maybe it's just public cloud infrastructure that will allow you to recover in the event of an attack. Now, we went back and forth about whether to include firewalls. Everyone really has a firewall these days, but they're not all necessarily what you would consider business class, and they're not all necessarily kept up to date. So we did include this. We're looking for business class firewalls with up-to-date software. If you don't keep the software up to date, then the firewall isn't capable of dealing with new exploits, new attacks that come out. And then for a higher score, we're looking for unified threat management features. That's what UTM stands for. That they need to typically be licensed and enabled. They can do perimeter malware scanning, virus scanning. They can do content filtering where they're blocking certain websites. And they can even do geo filtering where they're blocking access into your network from certain parts of the world. We're also looking for strict rule sets so that limits traffic, not just inbound, but also outbound from your network. So for example, if one of your computers was compromised when it was trying to send stuff or communicate outbound to the internet for remote control or other malicious purposes, that could be blocked from going out of your network. Now, almost all of our clients these days have Office 365. And if they don't, they probably have some kind of email server, maybe it's Exchange. And there's things you can do to secure Exchange or Office 365 that people may not think about. So Office 365 comes with a free multi-factor authentication. If you have Office 365, we highly recommend you make use of that. There's some other things you can do that aren't turned on out of the box. And Microsoft is actually starting to do a better job with security. Office 365 actually has its own secure score that you can access and recommendations that they walk you through. But some of these things we recommend are not on by default. So disabling forwarding to remote domains, that basically means that emails can't be forwarded via a rule like we talked about when I talked about the story in the beginning to a Gmail account or some external account. We can disable specific features. Not that many people these days with smartphones and the fact that Outlook just works over the internet really use Outlook web access. So if you're not using it, turn it off. And then basic mobile device management to require people to encrypt pins, to encrypt devices, and require pins on their devices. Might sound straightforward, but not everyone does that. And then again, taking it up a notch, subscribe to an advanced threat protection service to filter your email. That could be through Microsoft, but there's plenty of other third-party solutions out there as well that will do things like wrap links that are sent to you via email and essentially quarantine the link, make sure that the site is taken to it's it's taking you to is good, and then allow you onto the site. They also use AI to do things like look at phishing emails, to do attachment scanning. So these services, including Microsoft and others, are becoming more popular. The other thing you can do, which is really directly aimed at stopping phishing and spear phishing, is you can put a banner at the top of emails that come in from external recipients. And the idea with this is that if someone's spoofing, that means pretending to be someone in your organization, but they're not, you can see that that email actually came from an external recipient because there's a little banner that tells you that. So it may look like it comes from, Jesse at EXP Technical, but it's really come from a Gmail account. So that could alert users to that. As I said in the beginning, if I had to pick just one thing, if you asked me what's the one thing I should do, out of all these things, it would be multi-factor authentication. We think that it would probably stop 90% of the compromises we've seen out there just by turning this on. And as I mentioned, you can do that with Office 365 at no additional cost. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, you can sign up for a third-party service or indeed through Microsoft to have multi-factor authentication for your Windows logins. You can have it integrated so that that also works the same way for Office 365. You can integrate it with almost any VPN solution so that you really have two-step authentication for all of your users, all of your people, however they're connecting, whether it be to your servers, whether it be to Office 365, or indeed some third-party software as a service application. So software restriction policies and local administrator rights. The idea with these is to block ransomware. If your users, if your staff have full local admin rights on their machines, obviously they have access to a lot of functionality that can mean that a machine can become encrypted, and then that can spread to the network and other machines on the network. In addition, we can apply what we call software restriction policies, and what they do is limit what applications can run on the desktop. So between those two things, one or the other, we're looking to score 1 point, and then if you have both, we would mark you as a 2 for that one. So no matter how much technology you have in place, that can't mitigate for human error. So security awareness training is something that we are really recommending that everyone do these days. Now that could be as simple as an in-house training that's done for new hires. We actually did a webinar a few months ago, and we have a video that we can share with you if you like. It's freely available. That is a 15-minute training session. So that would be sort of initial score 1 for that. If you wanted to take it to the next level, there's subscription services out there. KnowBe4 is just one of them. There's others available that provide this training for people. And many of them also include what they call simulated phishing. So essentially the service that you subscribe to will send phishing emails or simulated phishing emails to your staff, and then tracks who's clicking on them. And then we can target those people with additional training. And this would probably be in my top 3 recommendations. You can put all the technology in the world in place, but if someone deliberately clicks something, goes to a website, enters their password in a website that's malicious, the technology can't always stop that. So training is really important, and we highly recommend it. Now we're getting into the policy procedure assessment pieces. that aren't necessarily technologies. They're more documents, processes that we as your IT team and you and the people within your organization can read, sign off, and follow. So we've identified 3 key policies we think everyone should have. They don't have to be huge documents. They don't have to be 3 different documents. They could all be 1 document. And they could just be part of your company handbook. And that's the acceptable use and security policy, some kind of mobile device and remote access policy, and a sanctions policy that defines what will happen if these policies are breached. So again, they could go in a company handbook. Everyone has to read when they join the organization. And then if you want to take it to the next level, we'd be looking for sign-off, recorded sign-off that people have read and agree to these policies. And of course, you could have additional policies. The one other one that is relevant, especially if you're in a regulated industry, would be a data classification policy. But there's a long list of IT security policies that you could put in place. And actually, as we move to the assessment piece, we'll touch on some of those other areas. Now, in terms of procedure, we're really looking back at IT, to the IT department, whether that's us or someone within your organization, for these procedures. And they should be written. And there's 3 that we've identified, or you could consider them 4, because if we look at number 1, it's a user onboarding procedure and a user termination procedure. When people are incoming to your organization, how are they set up? What permissions are they given? What software are they given? And as they leave the organization, what's done to terminate the account, disable passwords, save or discard their data, etc. An incident response plan and procedure really covers what IT should do along with the rest of the organization if there is a security incident typically aimed at, but it could be some kind of disaster incident as well, which really overlaps with the backup and disaster recovery procedure. And with that, we're looking for documented steps about how to recover data, how to recover servers in the event of either a disaster or an incident, maybe a ransomware attack. And we're looking for that to include testing of the procedure. And we can work with organizations, with our clients to create these things. I don't think they can really be created in a vacuum by IT. IT can do most of the work, but it has to be a partnership with the leadership of the organization to determine, for example, how are we going to handle terminations? And again, taking this to the next level, to score 2 points, we're looking for records that these procedures are being followed. So every time a new user comes on board, is there a checklist? Is that checklist recorded and saved so that if there is ever an issue, we can go back and say, okay, this checklist wasn't followed, or it was followed, but this step was missed. And the final item is an annual risk assessment and security plan. And we have built essentially a lightweight assessment that was developed by Pat Cook, who's on our team. He's a certified information security professional, and this is based on NIST standards. And NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's pretty much the de facto standard when it comes to IT security. So these assessments are typically done annually. They include a written document as the outcome, and they have a set of prioritized risks at the end of them, and remediation tasks are defined. And the areas covered, they're in the small print here. I won't go through them all, but you will be receiving a copy of the presentation as well as this video afterwards. Things like access control, auditing, configuration management. These are all areas that are covered in the NIST standard. And if you would like to score 2 points on this, if you go through this assessment process, we're looking not only to do it once, but for periodic review of the controls that have been put in place, the risks that are being mitigated, and then repetition of the assessment on an annual basis. Going backwards here. Okay, so those are the 10 controls or measures we recommend. So how do we go about getting these into our clients, working with our clients to implement them? Well, step one obviously is to assess current state. If you're an existing client, really won't take long to do that. We recommend, we think no more than an hour by your primary consultant to go through the checklist. If you're a new client and you don't work with EXP today, probably more like three or 4 hours to dig in, ask questions, maybe get a hands-on look at the IT. Once that's done, we can plan and prioritize what we're going to do first and map out the items you would like to address in what order over what period of time. And I should reiterate here, our expectation is that some of these things are probably going to be in place. So when we do that assessment, there's going to be some things that we can just check off immediately, may not need to be done. Anything that does need to be done, we're going to work with you to prioritize it. And again, that doesn't have to take a huge amount of time, maybe an hour or two, get the items prioritized, get a timeline set, and then we can begin execution. And obviously, as I keep saying, this is an iterative process, so we would like to reassess, after we get through all the items and begin again. So to wrap things up, let's go through what this might look like in terms of cost. So this example, we've picked a 25-person organization, maybe a couple of servers, and we phased it out over a 18 to 24 month period, let's say. So maybe the first things we do more along the basic side of things. And I should say this example is assuming we're going to do absolutely everything. Again, probably not the case. Some things are probably in place. So in Q1, phase one, we're going to look at password policy and training people on passwords. We're going to secure email systems and implement Office 365 MFA. Under $2,000 spread over 3 months to do that. Then for the rest of that year, or then over the next, say, 9 months, we'll look at some more sophisticated solutions, backup and disaster recovery, and a cloud DR implementation. You can see the cost estimated in services at $1,300 and an annual cost for a service, a couple of $1,000. And again, these are just examples. We can customize this to meet the needs of each client. Security awareness training, we think about $1,000 to set it up, and then it's a subscription to that service of relatively affordable, just over $500 a year. And then there's a firewall implementation listed here as well, about $1,300 estimated to set that up. And then of course you've got to buy a piece of hardware. So down at the bottom there, you can see just over $1,000 to buy a new firewall. And finally, that takes us through about 12 months. Maybe you've done, one of those last 3 things each quarter. We're looking at more sophisticated measures like software restriction policy, like building out some IT policies and some IT procedures. And those things combined, maybe looking in the $6,000 to $7,000 range, spread out over time. So if we break this down over an 18 to 24 month period, you're looking at maybe $500 a month-ish. And again, it will depend on your organization, the size, what you already have in place, which may take some things off this list. And then annual subscription services, about $3,000 and a $1,000-ish investment in hardware. So that should give you a picture of what it might take to implement all of these things. Again, our expectation is that some of these things will be in place. And we can customize the plan for each and every client. to fit their needs, fit their budget. And that pretty much wraps up my presentation. So at this point, we'll open it up to questions if you have any.
And if you guys, this is Jesse, if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and just shoot them into the chat. There's a couple that came through while you were talking, Tony, if you don't mind. I'll go ahead and go through the first couple of them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so number one, what is the most common security weakness you see in small to medium-sized businesses during an initial consultation?
That's a good question. If I had to pick one, well, I talked about awareness training, and people often don't think about that. I would say that training employees to be aware of phishing emails. I mean, that the number one attack we see is through phishing emails. So training people and making people aware of how to spot those is probably the biggest gap, and the one thing people don't always think about. They jump straight to the technology. Hey, can I get, better antivirus software? Can I get a better firewall? But people are not always thought about. So I would pick that.
Okay. So you're saying when it's finally time to increase or address, a lot of people typically go with the actual technology, the solution, the hardware, the tangible aspect versus getting the updated training and awareness and education on the newest threats.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me go to question number 2. What are some of the threats that a local company you work with should be aware of the most?
Well, I think I pretty much just said it, but yeah, the phishing. Most security breaches start with a phishing email. Whether it's spear phishing, and spear phishing, in case I don't think I actually said this, is a very targeted email. Spear phishing is when the attacker knows exactly who they are sending the email to within the organization. They typically know their role, they know who their boss is. So I would say phishing is the number one attack. And I think the statistic is that like 90% of cybersecurity attacks start with a phishing email, where they're trying to induce people to click on links, to go to websites, to open attachments. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and last one is, do you think the cost of security and other threat detection will rise as it becomes more prevalent?
Will it rise? I don't know if it will rise. I think that there will be more and more solutions, technology solutions and services that will pop up in this space to address cybersecurity issues. And I think that probably the types of attacks that we're seeing, there'll be new attacks, different ways that people try and get to you. So I think overall, it will require more investment in cybersecurity by organizations. The other factor that's going to influence that is the cloud. I mean, I think we're only at the beginning of the cloud. So the kind of traditional network perimeter, it used to be that, the firewall was the edge. Everything that you owned, all your data, all your systems was behind the firewall, and that's what we had to protect. But now with, SaaS applications, Office 365, other cloud applications, and even infrastructure as a service, that's, your data and your systems are all over the place, essentially. So it's harder to secure them. So I think actually probably the point solution, the individual solutions, the cost might come down over time, but the overall investment required is probably going to rise.
Okay. So the individual, um, the individual focal points of an overall security program, you think that the individual aspects singularly might rise or could rise in cost, whereas the overall plan um, will relatively stay the same, but it's mostly about there's more variances, more iterations of threats that people have to stay up with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, because I think there'll be more and more competition in the space with different solutions, and that will probably drive down the cost of individual items, but you'll need to do more.
Okay. That's perfect. And I think that is the end of our questions here.
Okay.
So if you don't mind real quick, I could talk about our referral program for everybody that's on the webinar today. Share this information with anybody, that you have contacts with, business contacts, colleagues, etc. And whether you're a current client or a new client, if you're a current client of EXP, you both will receive 2 hours of free consulting. And for new clients, bring in a partner. It's always better with a buddy. You guys come in and we'll sit down with you and your referrals. So a great way to get some of this security consulting on the books, just by introducing it to people you work with. And now it's time. It's time for the giveaway. I know that's everybody's been waiting for. And while we were going through the questions, this is a random drawing. Use a software to do this, and we came out with Greg Robinson is the one that wins the gift card. So you get to buy everybody coffee for a week, Greg.
Congratulations, Greg.
Congratulations, Greg.
We'll get that to you in the next week or two here.
And for everyone else, thanks for attending. Tony and I will send out a link to the recording in a couple of days. And then obviously, Tony, I'll let you close it out.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Just thank you to everyone for attending. If you do have questions, please just feel free to email me directly. It's just Tony at EXP Technical. And thanks for listening.